The courtroom air was thick with contempt, and every bit of it was aimed at Evelyn Vance. Her simple second-hand dress seemed to shrink under the weight of a dozen judgmental stares. Across the room, her ex-husband Julian Thorne sat beside his new fiancée, a woman draped in diamonds and disdain. They were there to finalize a divorce, but for them it was a victory lap. They were about to paint Evelyn as a worthless, leeching spouse who deserved nothing. Julian's lawyer was a shark circling ready to tear her apart in front of the judge. What could be more humiliating than being publicly destroyed by the man you once built a life with? They thought they knew everything about the quiet, timid woman they were casting aside. They were about to learn how devastatingly wrong they were. The sterile chill of courtroom 4B clung to Evelyn Vance's skin. It was a coldness that had nothing to do with the building's aggressive air conditioning and everything to do with the palpable scorn directed at her. She sat alone at the respondent's table, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white mountains on a pale landscape. Her lawyer, a young and earnest but visibly overwhelmed public defender named Sarah Jenkins, shuffled papers beside her, the rustling sound amplifying the silence. Across the aisle was the source of her current misery. Julian Thorne, her soon-to-be ex-husband, looked every bit the man of success she had helped him become. His suit was a custom-tailored Tom Ford, its dark charcoal fabric a testament to a world she was no longer a part of. Beside him, his fiancée Isabella Sterling was a portrait of condescending perfection. Her blonde hair was styled in a severe, elegant chignon, her pearl earrings catching the fluorescent light, and a smug little smile played on her lips as she occasionally leaned over to whisper in Julian's ear. They looked like a power couple on the cover of a business magazine. Evelyn, in her $15 thrift store dress, felt like a ghost haunting their triumph. "Your Honor," began Marcus Finch, Julian's lawyer. He was a man whose expensive cologne preceded him, a slick, silver-haired predator with a voice as smooth and dangerous as black ice. "We are here today to dissolve the marriage between my client, Mr. Julian Thorne, and the respondent, Ms. Evelyn Vance. But more specifically, we are here to address Ms. Vance's utterly baseless and frankly insulting claim for spousal support." Finch paced before the judge's bench, his movements theatrical and confident. "Mr. Thorne, through sheer brilliance and relentless hard work, has built a successful boutique investment firm, Thorne Capital. He is a pillar of the financial community. Ms. Vance, on the other hand—" He paused, turning to gesture dismissively at Evelyn. "Contributed nothing. In the 5 years of their marriage, she held a series of menial part-time jobs. A barista here, a bookstore clerk there, never showing any ambition, any drive. She was to be blunt a domestic anchor on a man destined for the stratosphere." Evelyn flinched as if struck. A domestic anchor. Was that what she was? She thought of the countless nights she'd worked double shifts at the diner, the scent of grease clinging to her hair, so Julian could afford the subscription to the Wall Street Journal and the data terminals he needed. She remembered selling her late mother's locket, the only piece of real jewelry she owned, to pay for the deposit on his first office space. He'd called her his angel investor, then kissing her hands and promising her the world. Furthermore, Finch continued, his voice dripping with theatrical pity, "Ms. Vance has made no effort to become self-sufficient since their separation 6 months ago. She lives in a rundown apartment, works minimal hours at a local library, and seems to expect my client, a man she emotionally abandoned long ago, to fund her unambitious lifestyle indefinitely. It is not just unreasonable, Your Honor, it is parasitic." Isabella Sterling let out a soft, delicate scoff, just loud enough for Evelyn to hear. She glanced at Julian, who refused to meet her eyes, instead staring at the judge with a look of pained sincerity. He was playing the victim, the magnanimous genius held back by a simple, grasping woman. "We have bank statements, employment records," Finch said, slapping a folder onto the clerk's desk. "They will show a woman content with mediocrity while my client built an empire. To award her alimony would be to reward indolence. We propose a one-time settlement of $5,000, a generous offer to help her get on her feet. And nothing more. $5,000. For 5 years of her life. For sacrificing her own dreams, for believing in his." A bitter laugh almost escaped Evelyn's lips. It was less than the cost of the watch on Isabella's wrist. The judge, a stern-faced woman named Judge Miller, peered down at Evelyn over her glasses. Ms. Vance, your lawyer's initial filing requested 50% of all assets acquired during the marriage and ongoing alimony of $10,000 a month. Mr. Finch presents a very different picture of your contributions. Do you have a response? Evelyn's throat felt like it was filled with sand. All eyes were on her. She could feel the weight of their judgment, their belief that she was exactly what Finch had painted her to be, a pathetic failure clinging to a successful man's coattails. Your Honor, Sarah Jenkins began, her voice a little shaky. My client supported Mr. Thorne emotionally and financially in the early years. Her income, while modest, paid for their living expenses, while Mr. Thorne's business was still a concept. Finch laughed a short barking sound. Objection, Your Honor, vague and unsubstantiated. Does she have receipts for the groceries she bought? A ledger for every cup of coffee. This is the desperate grasping of a woman who realizes she let a winning lottery ticket slip through her fingers. The small gallery, mostly composed of Julian and Isabella's friends, tittered with amusement. Julian finally chanced a look at Evelyn, his expression a mixture of pity and annoyance. It was the look you give a stray dog you have to shoo away from your pristine porch. That look, more than anything Finch had said, broke something inside Evelyn. The dam of quiet suffering she had maintained for months finally cracked. She took a slow, deep breath, the cold courtroom air a shock to her lungs. The fear and shame that had paralyzed her began to recede, replaced by a slow-burning, diamond-hard resolve. They wanted to know about her finances. They wanted to talk about what she was owed. Fine. It was time to stop playing by their rules. She leaned over and whispered something to her lawyer. Sarah Jenkins' eyes widened in shock, then confusion, then a dawning, electrifying understanding. She straightened up, her entire demeanor changing from that of a nervous rookie to a confident professional. Your Honor, Sarah said, her voice now clear and strong, cutting through the murmurs in the room. We withdraw our previous request. It is, as Mr. Finch so crudely pointed out, inadequate. Finch smirked. Finally some sense. So you'll be accepting my client's generous offer? No, Sarah said, looking directly at him. We will be filing a new motion. A motion to dismiss the need for any spousal support whatsoever. My client has no need for Mr. Thorne's money. However, we will be seeking reimbursement for a number of personal assets left in the marital home. She paused, letting the statement hang in the air. Assets valued conservatively at approximately $25 million. The courtroom fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Marcus Finch's smirk vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed gape. Julian and Isabella stared, their faces masks of pure disbelief. $25 million. From the woman in the cheap dress, the game had just changed, and Evelyn Vance was finally ready to play. The memory was so vivid it felt like yesterday. It was raining, a relentless New York City downpour that turned the streets into dark, glistening mirrors. They were huddled in their tiny fourth-floor walk-up apartment in Brooklyn, the one with the rattling radiator and the window that never quite closed. Evelyn had just come home from a 12-hour shift at the Daily Grind, a coffee shop where she was a star barista, her hands aching and smelling faintly of burnt espresso. Julian was at their rickety dining table, which was buried under a mountain of papers, his face illuminated by the glow of a laptop screen. He hadn't even noticed she'd come in. That was common in those days. His mind was always miles away, lost in the intricate world of algorithms, market trends, and financial projections. Jules, she had said softly, placing a paper bag on the one clear corner of the table. I brought you a sandwich. The pastrami you like. He looked up, his eyes unfocused for a moment before recognition dawned. Oh, Ellie. Hey. I didn't hear you. He ran a hand through his already messy hair. I think I'm onto something. A predictive algorithm for microcap stocks. It's revolutionary. She had smiled, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the face of his infectious passion. This was the Julian she had fallen in love with. The brilliant, driven dreamer who saw patterns in the chaos of the world that no one else could. He wasn't Julian Thorne, the future CEO then. He was just Jules the boy with a dream too big for their tiny apartment. "That's amazing," she said, unwrapping the sandwich for him. "Eat something. You've been at this for 2 days straight." He took a bite, chewing absently. "The server costs are going to be insane to backtest this properly. And I need a Bloomberg terminal subscription. That's $2,000 a month, Ellie. $2,000. He sighed, the weight of his ambition pressing down on him. "It's impossible." Evelyn looked around their apartment. Every piece of furniture was second-hand, every dish was chipped. Her clothes were from clearance racks, her one luxury a new book every month. All their money, every spare dollar from her job and his occasional freelance coding gigs, went into a savings account labeled The Dream. But it wasn't enough. The next day she took the subway to a small dusty pawn shop in the Diamond District. In her pocket was a small velvet box. Inside lay a delicate gold locket intricately carved with forget-me-nots. It had been her mother's, given to her on her 16th birthday. It was the most precious thing she owned, a tangible link to a past she rarely spoke of. She walked out an hour later with $2,500 in cash, enough for the subscription and a little extra. When she gave the money to Julian that night, he was ecstatic. "Ellie Howe. Where did you get this?" "I have my ways," she'd said with a breezy smile, tucking the memory of the gruff pawnbroker and the ache in her heart into a deep, hidden corner. "Call me your angel investor." He had lifted her off her feet, spinning her around their tiny living room. "When Thorne Capital is a reality, I'll buy you 1,000 lockets. I'll buy you a diamond for every coffee you've ever served. I promise, Ellie. It's all for us." For us. That had been the mantra. The sacrifices piled up, each one a brick in the foundation of his success. She took on extra shifts, becoming a waitress at night after her barista job. She learned to patch his suits, to cook gourmet-tasting meals on a shoestring budget for the potential investors he'd bring over. She was his sounding board, his cheerleader, his unpaid assistant, and the silent, steady engine that kept his life running while he focused solely on the dream. The day Thorne Capital secured its first round of major funding was the best day of their lives. He came home, lifted her up in that same way, and they drank champagne, real expensive champagne, out of their mismatched coffee mugs. The future felt limitless. But success, Evelyn learned, was a corrosive acid. The more successful Julian became, the more the us began to feel like him. Their tiny apartment was traded for a sleek, minimalist condo overlooking Central Park. Her thrift store clothes were replaced by designer outfits he'd pick out, telling her she needed to look the part. The brilliant, passionate dreamer was slowly being replaced by a polished, calculating stranger. He began to criticize her. Her lack of a prestigious degree. Her simple hobbies of reading and gardening on their small balcony. Her friends who were nurses and teachers, not hedge fund managers and socialites. "Ellie, you're not even trying," he'd say, frustrated after a networking event where she'd spent most of her time talking to the catering staff. "These people are important. You need to engage." She had tried, but she felt like a fraud in that world of fake smiles and transactional conversations. It wasn't her. The more he pushed her to be someone else, the more she retreated into herself. Then came Isabella Sterling. Her father ran a competing older firm. A union between Julian and Isabella was more than a marriage. It was a merger. Evelyn first saw them together in a photo in a society column. Julian had his arm around Isabella's waist at a charity gala he told Evelyn he was attending with his lawyer. He looked happy. He looked like he belonged. The confrontation was cold and clinical. It didn't happen in their home, but in a neutral, sterile coffee shop, a cruel irony that wasn't lost on Evelyn. "It's not working, Evelyn," he said, not even looking at her, stirring a sugar he didn't take into his black coffee. "We want different things. I've outgrown this. We've outgrown this." "You mean you found someone more useful?" she said, her voice quiet, devoid of the tears he was clearly expecting. His eyes flickered with annoyance. That's a crude way of putting it. Isabella understands my world. She's a part of it. You were for the beginning. I'll always be grateful for that. But this is the big leagues now. He slid a piece of paper across the table. A separation agreement. The terms were insulting. He was effectively erasing her, turning 5 years of her life into a footnote. I'll be generous, he'd said, the words a slap in the face. I won't let you be destitute. Looking back now from the cold vantage point of the courtroom, Evelyn understood. He didn't just want a divorce. He wanted to retroactively invalidate their entire history. He needed to believe that he had done it all himself, that she was nothing more than a temporary phase, a piece of scaffolding to be kicked away once the skyscraper was built. By painting her as a lazy, unambitious parasite, he wasn't just trying to save money. He was trying to save his own story, rewriting it with himself as the solitary hero. And for that lie, he needed to humiliate her. He needed to make her small so he could feel big. The silence in courtroom 4B was a physical entity. It pressed in on them thick and heavy. Marcus Finch's face, usually a mask of smug control, had cycled through confusion, disbelief, and was now settling on outright fury. $25 million. Finch finally sputtered, turning to the judge as if she were his ally. Your Honor, this is absurd. It's a desperate, ludicrous tactic. What assets is she possibly referring to? A collection of used books and chipped coffee mugs. Judge Miller, however, was no longer looking at Finch. Her gaze was fixed on Sarah Jenkins, and for the first time a flicker of genuine interest lit her tired eyes. Ms. Jenkins, the judge said, her voice dangerously level. You've made an extraordinary claim. I trust you are prepared to substantiate it. This court does not appreciate theatrics. We are, Your Honor. Sarah said, her newfound confidence radiating from her. She opened a thin file folder, one that had been sitting on her desk, ignored all morning. During their marriage, Mr. Thorne and my client resided at 113 Central Park West Apartment 14A. When my client vacated the premises following their separation, she left behind several personal items she was unable to transport at the time. She slid a document across the table. This is a preliminary inventory. The first item is a painting that was hung in the main living area. It's a piece by Jean-Michel Basquiat titled Untitled Cadmium. A wave of murmurs rippled through the gallery. Even Julian looked confused, his brow furrowed. He glanced at Isabella, who simply shrugged, a look of bored annoyance on her face. Finch let out a derisive snort. A Basquiat. Your Honor, they had a print, a poster they bought online for $50 and had framed. Is this a joke? My client is not referring to a print, Sarah stated calmly. She is referring to the original 1984 acrylic and oil stick on canvas. It was a gift to my client on her 18th birthday. Julian actually laughed out loud this time. That's insane. Evelyn, own a Basquiat. Her father was a high school history teacher and her mother was a librarian. They lived in a suburb in Ohio. Where would she possibly get a multi-million-dollar painting? He turned to the judge, spreading his hands in a gesture of utter bewilderment. Your Honor, see what I'm dealing with? She's delusional. Evelyn watched him, her expression unreadable. She let him talk. She let him dig his own grave. He was so convinced of the narrative he had built of her simple, unremarkable past that he couldn't see the truth even as it began to assemble itself right in front of him. The second item, Sarah continued undeterred, is a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime watch reference, 6300G. It was kept in a safe in the master bedroom closet. Mr. Thorne was aware of the safe, though he was never given the combination. Julian's face went pale. He remembered the safe. It had been installed when they moved in. Evelyn had told him it was for sentimental documents. He'd found it odd, but he'd been too busy with the firm to question it. He'd just assumed it held old family photos and letters. A Patek Philippe. The most complicated and expensive wristwatch in the world. He felt a cold knot of dread begin to form in his stomach. And the third item, Sarah said, her voice dropping slightly for dramatic effect, is a set of bearer bonds issued by the United States Treasury with a face value of $10 million. They were stored in the same safe. The courtroom erupted. Finch was on his feet shouting, "Your Honor, this is a fabrication. A fantasy. She's inventing a treasure chest to extort my client. We demand proof, provenance documentation." "We have it," Sarah said simply. She pulled out another document. "This is a notarized statement from the executor of my client's family estate along with insurance riders for the specified items, all under the name Evelyn Vance. Blackwood." The name landed in the room like a grenade. Blackwood. Not a common name, but in the circles Julian and Isabella now moved in. It was a name spoken with the kind of reverence usually reserved for royalty or gods. It was the name associated with Blackwood Industries, the reclusive multinational conglomerate with interests in everything from shipping to aerospace to rare earth minerals. It was a name synonymous with old money, immense power, and impenetrable privacy. Isabella Sterling gasped, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes, wide with shock, darted from Sarah to Evelyn. She was finally looking at Evelyn, truly seeing her for the first time. The cheap dress, the quiet demeanor, it all suddenly seemed like a costume, a deliberate disguise. Julian was frozen, his mind racing, trying to connect the dots. Blackwood. Evelyn Vance Blackwood. He remembered her talking about her father, how they were estranged. She'd said he was a difficult man who disapproved of her choices. Julian had pictured a stubborn small-town teacher who wanted his daughter to marry a local boy, not a brilliant financier. He'd never once asked for her father's name. It had seemed so unimportant, a relic from a past she and he had left behind. Blackwood. Finch repeated, his voice suddenly weak, the bluster gone. As in, Alexander Blackwood. The very same, Sarah confirmed. Evelyn is his only child, his sole heir. She chose to live under her mother's maiden name, Vance, to live a normal life. To find a partner who would love her for who she was, not for the name she carried. Sarah's eyes met Julian's, and her gaze was filled with ice. A regrettable and clearly failed experiment. The truth slammed into Julian with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just a lie. It was an entire universe of deceit he had been too arrogant and self-absorbed to notice. Evelyn, the simple girl. Evelyn, the barista. Evelyn, the domestic anchor. It had all been a choice. Her sacrifice wasn't selling a locket. Her sacrifice was giving up a life of unimaginable luxury to be with him, to believe in him. And he had thrown it all away. He looked at her, then truly looked at her. The woman he had called parasitic, unambitious, and delusional. She sat there poised and calm, her expression not of triumph, but of a deep, profound sorrow. The sorrow of a woman who had gambled her heart on a man, and lost in the most spectacular way possible. In that moment, Julian Thorne didn't just see the heiress to the Blackwood fortune. He saw the greatest mistake of his entire life. The winning lottery ticket he hadn't just let slip through his fingers, he had torn it to shreds and thrown it in the face of the woman who handed it to him. Isabella was already inching her chair away from him, her face a mask of horror and calculation. She wasn't looking at a fiancé anymore. She was looking at the stupidest man in the world. The courtroom was in a state of suspended animation, caught in the aftershock of the name Blackwood. Judge Miller, for her part, had regained her composure with the practiced ease of a woman who had seen every form of human drama. She banged her gavel once, the sharp crack echoing in the stunned silence. "Order," she commanded. "Mr. Finch, sit down. Ms. Jenkins, you have made a claim that changes the entire nature of these proceedings. You mentioned an executor. You mentioned documentation. But in a case this unusual, the court will require more." Marcus Finch, seeing a sliver of opportunity, scrambled to his feet again. "Exactly, Your Honor. This is hearsay. Papers can be forged. Stories can be invented. They have to produce more than a name. They have to produce a person." Where is this mythical Alexander Blackwood? Why isn't he here to confirm this preposterous story? It was a valid point. Alexander Blackwood was notoriously private, a veritable ghost who hadn't been photographed in public for over 2 decades. The idea of him appearing in a divorce court in Lower Manhattan was laughable. Finch knew it, and a bit of his swagger returned. He was betting it was all a bluff, an incredibly audacious one, but a bluff nonetheless. Sarah Jenkins didn't flinch. She glanced at the clock on the courtroom wall, then towards the heavy oak doors at the back. My client's father is currently on a transoceanic flight and cannot be reached. His privacy is, as Mr. Finch knows, of paramount importance. However, she said, her timing impeccable, we were prepared for the court's need for direct verification. We have a witness. A witness, the judge asked, her eyebrows raised. Your witness list was submitted last week. It contained only one name, Evelyn Vance. This is an unscheduled character and financial witness. Your Honor, Sarah admitted. But their testimony is vital to corroborate my client's identity and financial standing, a matter which the petitioner's counsel has aggressively and repeatedly called into question. Given the circumstances, we believe their testimony is essential for justice to be served. Finch was livid. Objection. This is a procedural ambush. We have had no time to prepare, no opportunity for discovery on this mystery witness. This is a complete violation of protocol. Ordinarily, Mr. Finch. I would agree with you, Judge Miller said, her tone sharp. However, you are the one who spent the last hour painting Ms. Vance as a destitute liar. You opened this door. You demanded proof. Ms. Jenkins is offering to provide it. I'm going to allow it. But she warned Sarah this had better be substantive. Thank you, Your Honor, Sarah said with a respectful nod. She turned toward the back of the room. The defense calls Arthur Pendleton to the stand. If the name Blackwood was a grenade, Arthur Pendleton was a precision-guided missile. To the average person, the name meant nothing. But in the rarefied air of global finance and corporate law, the world Julian and Finch inhabited, Arthur Pendleton was a legend. He was the CEO of the Blackwood Industries parent company, the public face of the invisible empire. He was Alexander Blackwood's right hand, his gatekeeper, and his most trusted advisor for over 30 years. They called him the Viceroy. Julian's blood ran cold. He had seen Pendleton speak once at a Davos summit he'd paid a fortune to attend. The man exuded an aura of quiet, unassailable power that made brash new money players like Julian feel like children. The idea of Arthur Pendleton walking into this courtroom on behalf of Evelyn was impossible. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. 2 men in dark, severe suits entered first, their eyes scanning the room with professional efficiency. They were clearly security, and then between them walked Arthur Pendleton. He was in his late 60s, tall and wiry, with a full head of silver hair and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wasn't dressed in the flashy style of lawyers like Finch. He wore a simple, impeccably tailored gray suit, a white shirt, and a dark blue tie. His clothes didn't shout money. They whispered it from a great and inaccessible distance. He walked with a calm, deliberate pace down the central aisle, his gaze fixed forward. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. The air crackled with his presence. He passed Julian's table without a flicker of acknowledgement. Julian felt an involuntary urge to shrink in his seat, to become invisible. Pendleton's very existence in this room was a verdict on Julian's life, a judgment far more potent than any the judge could deliver. He had not just divorced a woman, he had insulted an empire. Arthur Pendleton reached the witness stand and stood patiently waiting to be sworn in. He looked at Evelyn, and for a single fleeting moment his stern expression softened into one of paternal affection and concern. It was a look that confirmed everything. Marcus Finch sank into his chair, his face ashen. All the fight had gone out of him. He was a shark, yes, but he had just discovered that he was swimming in an ocean that belonged to a blue whale, and he had made the fatal mistake of trying to bite it. Isabella Sterling slowly, deliberately picked up her crocodile leather handbag from the floor. She placed it in her lap and opened it, her movements precise and mechanical. She was no longer looking at anyone. She was calculating her escape. The merger was off. The court clerk, a man who had seen decades of mundane disputes, fumbled slightly as he administered the oath to Arthur Pendleton. The witness's quiet gravitas seemed to unnerve even him. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Pendleton replied, his voice calm and clear, carrying easily through the silent room. Sarah Jenkins approached the stand. "Mr. Pendleton, could you please state your full name and occupation for the court?" "My name is Arthur Hemmings Pendleton. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Blackwood Global Industries." Each word was delivered with precision, a statement of irrefutable fact. "And in what capacity do you know my client, Ms. Evelyn Vance?" Pendleton turned his gaze slightly to look at Evelyn, a fond, almost sad smile touching his lips for an instant. "I have known Evelyn since the day she was born. I am her godfather, and I am the executor of her family's trust." Sarah nodded. "Can you confirm for the court her relationship to your employer, Mr. Alexander Blackwood?" "Evelyn is Mr. Blackwood's only child and sole heir," Pendleton stated simply. "Her legal name is Evelyn Vance Blackwood. Vance was her mother's name. After her mother's passing and upon entering adulthood, Evelyn made a personal decision to use the name Vance exclusively in her public life. It was a choice born of a desire for privacy and normalcy, a choice her father, though he may not have fully understood it, begrudgingly respected. Finch, seeing his career flashing before his eyes, knew he had to do something, anything. He weakly rose to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is all very touching, but it's not relevant to the division of marital assets." Judge Miller glared at him. "Mr. Finch, you spent the better part of an hour arguing that Ms. Vance's financial standing was zero, and that her character was that of a common grifter. This testimony speaks directly to both of those assertions." "Overruled. Sit down." Finch sat, his face burning with humiliation. Sarah continued. "Mr. Pendleton, we have submitted an inventory of 3 specific items: a Basquiat painting, a Patek Philippe watch, and a series of bearer bonds, which my client claims are her personal non-marital property. Can you speak to the authenticity of these claims?" "I certainly can," Pendleton said. "The Basquiat Untitled Cadmium was purchased by Mr. Blackwood at a Sotheby's auction in 2015. It was a gift for Evelyn's 18th birthday. I personally oversaw the acquisition and the drafting of the deed of gift. It is her sole property. Its last appraisal valued it at $17 million. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. $17 million. For one painting. Julian felt dizzy. The numbers were so large they were almost meaningless. He remembered that painting. It had hung over their sofa. He'd always thought it was a chaotic, ugly mess. He'd once joked about replacing it with something more soothing. Evelyn had just given him a strange, sad look and changed the subject. "The Patek Philippe." Pendleton continued his tone as even as if he were reading a grocery list. "Was also a gift. From me, actually. For her graduation from Columbia University. It is one of only 7 in existence. Its value is approximately $3.5 million. Julian's mind reeled. Columbia Evelyn had told him she had a simple state college degree. Another lie. A lie to make herself seem smaller, less intimidating, more like him. The generosity of her deception was in its own way more devastating than the wealth itself. "And the bearer bonds," Sarah prompted. "Those were placed in a trust for Evelyn by her late mother, Catherine Vance Blackwood. They were intended as an emergency fund for Evelyn to be kept entirely separate from the Blackwood family finances to give her a measure of independence. I can confirm their face value is $10 million. All of these items predate her marriage to Mr. Thorne by several years. They are unequivocally her personal property." Pendleton paused, then shifted his gaze, pinning Julian Thorne with a look as cold and sharp as a shard of ice. Your Honor, if I may add a personal observation, Pendleton said, his voice taking on a harder edge. For the past 6 years, I have watched Evelyn live a life of profound modesty. She has done so to test a hypothesis that she could find a partner who valued her spirit, her intelligence, and her heart above all else. She actively hid a personal fortune that dwarfs Mr. Thorne's entire company, not out of deceit but out of hope. She worked grueling, thankless jobs not because she had to, but to support the man she loved, to allow his dream to flourish. She contributed every dollar she earned and every ounce of her energy to their partnership. He let the words sink in. The accusation I heard upon entering this courtroom that she was a parasite, an anchor, a woman of no ambition, is not only a grotesque falsehood, but the single greatest misjudgment of character I have ever witnessed in my 68 years. Mr. Thorne did not have a leech for a wife. He had a benefactress of unimaginable generosity. He was a man who was handed the keys to a kingdom, and instead of entering, he complained about the weight of the keys and threw them away for a handful of shiny pebbles. The metaphor delivered in Pendleton's devastatingly calm voice was brutal. It stripped Julian bare, exposing his shallow ambition and catastrophic lack of perception for everyone to see. Isabella Sterling had heard enough. Quietly, without a word to Julian, she stood up. She smoothed down her dress, picked up her purse, and with the posture of a queen abandoning a fallen state, she walked calmly out of the courtroom. The soft click of the door closing behind her was the sound of Julian's future ending. Julian didn't watch her go. He couldn't take his eyes off Evelyn. She was looking at Pendleton, and her eyes were shining with unshed tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude. For the first time in months, someone had spoken the truth. Someone had seen her. "I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor," Sarah Jenkins said, returning to her seat. Judge Miller looked at the shell-shocked Marcus Finch. "Mr. Finch, cross-examination." Finch looked at Pendleton, who met his gaze with unnerving calm. "Cross-examine the Viceroy of the Blackwood Empire. It would be professional suicide." "No, Your Honor." Finch mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. "No questions." Judge Miller surveyed the scene before her. The petitioner's side was in disarray. Julian Thorne sat alone, a man hollowed out, the architecture of his arrogance having collapsed in on itself. His lawyer, Marcus Finch, was shuffling papers with no purpose, avoiding eye contact with everyone. The respondent's side, by contrast, was a bastion of quiet strength. "Well," the judge said, her voice laced with an irony so dry it could start a fire, "this has certainly been an illuminating morning. The court finds the testimony of Mr. Pendleton to be credible and compelling." She fixed her gaze on Julian. "Mr. Thorne, your petition to deny spousal support is of course granted, as the respondent has graciously withdrawn her request. As for the matter of the personal assets, Ms. Jenkins has your client made arrangements to retrieve her property." "We have, Your Honor." Sarah confirmed. "Mr. Pendleton's security team is on standby. We request a court order granting my client immediate and exclusive access to the residence at 113 Central Park West for a period of 2 hours to retrieve her belongings." "So ordered," the judge said, banging her gavel. It felt less like a closing and more like a final nail being hammered into the coffin of Julian's life. "And as for the petitioner's generous offer of a $5,000 settlement," she looked at Julian with utter disdain, "the court dismisses that offer as insulting, made in bad faith, and based on a complete and willful misrepresentation of the facts. This proceeding is concluded." The gavel fell one last time. It was over. As people began to stir, the muted buzz of shocking gossip filling the room, Arthur Pendleton stepped down from the witness stand. He walked over to the defense table and placed a gentle hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and kind. Evelyn finally looked up, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She nodded, managing a small, watery smile. "Thank you, Arthur. For everything." "Alexander wanted to come himself," Pendleton admitted. "I had to talk him out of it. He would have bought the courthouse and had it demolished with Mr. Thorne still inside." Despite everything, a small laugh escaped Evelyn's lips. It felt like the first ray of sunshine after a long storm. She stood, and for the first time that day she squared her shoulders and looked across the aisle at the man who had been her husband. Julian was staring at her, his face a pathetic mask of desperation and dawning horror. As she began to walk away, flanked by Pendleton and her lawyer, he finally snapped out of his trance. "Ellie." He called out, his voice cracking. He stumbled from his chair, rushing to intercept her before she reached the aisle. "Ellie, wait. We need to talk." Pendleton's security men moved instantly, stepping between Julian and Evelyn, forming a silent, immovable wall. "Please," Julian begged, his voice, pleading, his eyes wild with regret. "I didn't know. I swear I had no idea. I made a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake." Evelyn stopped. She looked at him, not over the shoulders of the security guards, but by stepping slightly to the side, meeting his gaze directly. The look in her eyes was not one of anger or hatred. It was something far worse, pity. It was the look one gives to something broken and insignificant. "You're right, Julian," she said, her voice steady and clear, carrying in the now quiet courtroom. "You did make a mistake. But your mistake wasn't leaving me. And it wasn't not knowing about my family." She took a step closer, forcing him to see the profound truth of her words. "Your mistake was believing that a person's worth is measured by their bank account. You mocked me for being a barista, a librarian. You were ashamed of me because I wasn't a CEO or a socialite. You didn't see any value in kindness or loyalty or sacrifice unless it directly served your ambition." She let the silence hang for a moment. "The money doesn't change who I am. I'm still the woman who served coffee to support you. I'm still the woman who sold her mother's locket for you. The only thing that has changed is that now you see that woman as valuable, and that Julian is why we are over. You didn't fall in love with Evelyn Vance, and you certainly don't deserve Evelyn Blackwood." With that, she turned her back on him. She didn't look back as she walked out of the courtroom, Arthur Pendleton at her side, leaving Julian Thorne standing alone in the ruins of his own making, a desperately poor man who had for a brief, shining moment held all the wealth in the world in his hands and had been too blind to see it. The news of the courtroom drama spread through New York's elite circles like wildfire. The story was just too delicious, the meteoric rise and spectacular self-destruction of Julian Thorne. His firm Thorne Capital imploded within a week. Investors, spooked by his catastrophic lack of judgment, pulled their money out. His reputation as a brilliant visionary was replaced by a new one, the fool who divorced the Blackwood heiress. No one wanted to do business with a man who couldn't recognize a billion-dollar asset when he was married to it. He lost the condo, his business, and what few real friends he had. He tried calling Evelyn hundreds of times, but the calls went unanswered. He was a pariah, a walking cautionary tale whispered about at galas and in boardrooms. The shiny pebbles he had chosen Isabella status, a fleeting sense of superiority, had all turned to dust in his hands. 3 months passed. To the gossiping circles of New York's elite, the story of Julian Thorne's downfall had been a thrilling but fleeting drama. He was yesterday's news, a cautionary tale that had already been replaced by newer scandals. Evelyn Vance Blackwood had simply vanished, retreating behind the impenetrable walls that the Blackwood name afforded. Many assumed she had simply returned to a life of quiet, reclusive luxury, the brief, messy chapter of her public life now closed. They were wrong. The bomb dropped not in a society column, but on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The headline was stark printed in bold, uncompromising ink: "Blackwood Heiress launches $500 million Vance Foundation for Educational and Arts Access." Beneath it was a photograph of Evelyn taken at a press conference held not in some sterile corporate ballroom but in the majestic book-lined hall of the New York Public Library. She looked transformed. The timid, haunted woman from the courtroom was gone, replaced by a leader. She was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored navy blue dress, her hair cut in a sharp professional bob. There was no ostentatious jewelry, only the quiet confidence of a woman who had found her power. Her eyes, once downcast, were now clear-focused, and held a fire that no one, least of all Julian, had ever seen before. The launch of the Vance Foundation was a meticulously planned statement. The guest list was not a Rolodex of Wall Street titans and vapid socialites. It was composed of university presidents, celebrated poets, struggling playwrights, community organizers, and public school teachers. It was a room full of the very people Julian's world considered insignificant. Her speech, delivered without notes, was a masterpiece of grace and purpose. For a portion of my life, she began, her voice steady and resonant. I chose to live under my mother's name, Vance. She was a librarian. My father, a man of industry, built empires of steel and commerce. But my mother built empires of the mind. She believed that access to knowledge, to art, to beauty was not a luxury, but a fundamental human right. She taught me that a person's true net worth isn't found on a balance sheet, but in the richness of their curiosity and the depth of their empathy. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the rapt audience. The world has enough foundations dedicated to building bigger buildings. This foundation is dedicated to building bigger minds. The Vance Foundation will be dedicated to ensuring that the next great novelist isn't lost because her local library closed down, that the next scientific genius isn't overlooked because he couldn't afford tuition, and that the value of a quiet life dedicated to knowledge is celebrated, not mocked. The final line was a subtle, perfectly aimed dart, and the message was clear. This was not an act of charity. It was a reordering of values. In a subsequent rare one-on-one interview with a respected journalist, the inevitable question arose. "Your story has captivated the public," the interviewer said gently. "Many see what happened to your ex-husband as a form of cosmic revenge. Do you?" Evelyn's smile was thoughtful, devoid of malice. "I don't believe in revenge. Revenge is a conversation with the past, and I am far more interested in building the future. What happened in that courtroom wasn't about punishing Julian. It was about my own liberation. For years I allowed someone else to define my worth, to dictate my story. I made myself small to make him feel big, believing that was the nature of love and support. My mistake was in thinking that my value was something that could be diminished by someone else's opinion." She leaned forward, her sincerity palpable. "My father's name, Blackwood, provides the resources for this work. It's a tool, a powerful one. But my mother's name, Vance, provides the mission. This foundation is my voice. It's a testament to the belief that true strength isn't about how much you can acquire, but how much you can give. My story isn't about a secret heiress. It's about a librarian's daughter finally putting her mother's lessons into practice." Far across town, in a dimly lit bar in Queens that smelled of stale beer and regret, Julian Thorne watched the interview on a flickering television mounted over the counter. He was nursing a cheap whiskey, the amber liquid doing little to numb the perpetual ache in his soul. He had lost everything. His firm was a bankrupt shell, his condo had been sold to cover his debts, and his name was a punchline. He was wearing a frayed shirt, his face unshaven, the ghost of the Tom Ford-wearing titan he once was. As Evelyn spoke, every word was a fresh torment. A librarian's daughter. He remembered mocking her mother's profession, the value of a quiet life. He remembered calling her unambitious. He saw the Basquiat he'd called an ugly mess, now the cornerstone of a museum exhibit funded by her foundation. He saw the brilliant, kind, and profoundly wealthy woman he had cast aside for a shallow socialite who hadn't returned a single one of his calls. He hadn't just misjudged her finances, he had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of value itself. His ambition had been a raging fire that had given him a brief, brilliant light before consuming him completely, leaving him as nothing but cold ash. He finally understood. He hadn't just lost a fortune. He had lost a universe. Evelyn, meanwhile, was miles away from any thought of him. The interview was over. The galas and press conferences were done for the day. She was at a small, underfunded community library in the Bronx, one of the first recipients of a Vance grant. There were no cameras here. She sat on a small stool in the children's section reading a storybook to a small group of wide-eyed kids. In this quiet, unassuming space, surrounded by the smell of old paper and youthful imagination, she was truly home. She was not Evelyn Blackwood, the heiress, Nor was she Evelyn Vance, the mocked ex-wife. She was simply Evelyn, a woman who had walked through fire and emerged, not hardened but illuminated, finally building an empire of her own, one book, one mind, one quiet act of kindness at a time. Evelyn's journey wasn't just about revealing a secret identity, it was about revealing her true self, a self she had hidden even from herself. She walked into that courtroom a victim, and walked out a victor, not because of her money, but because she finally reclaimed her own story. It's a powerful reminder that our worth is never defined by someone else's opinion or their inability to see our value. It's defined by our own integrity, kindness, and the strength to stand up for who we are. What do you think was the biggest mistake Julian made? Was it his greed, his arrogance, or his simple failure to see the amazing person right in front of him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by Evelyn's story of humiliation and ultimate triumph, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribing to the channel for more powerful real-life stories. Your support helps us continue to bring these incredible journeys to light. Thank you for watching. Have you ever seen someone try to destroy another person's self-worth, only for it to backfire in the most spectacular way imaginable? This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of Emily Vance, a woman whose ex-husband turned their divorce into a public spectacle. He flaunted his new younger bride like a trophy, making sure Emily heard every detail of his supposed upgrade. He thought he had buried her in shame, but he made one critical mistake: he never realized who she truly was. What happens when the woman he threw away doesn't just get back on her feet, but rises so high that she ends up marrying the one man he could never hope to be? Stay tuned. Emily Vance once believed her life was a portrait of success. She was married to Michael Sterling, a charismatic and ambitious investment banker whose star was rapidly ascending at Morgan Stanley. They lived in a sleek, minimalist apartment in Tribeca with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a city that felt like theirs to conquer. To their friends, to their families, and especially to Michael's snobbish parents, Gloria and Robert Sterling, they were the perfect couple. He the financial prodigy, she the brilliant architect who had put her own budding firm on hold to support his demanding career and curate their perfect life. The cracks, however, had been forming for years, so fine and subtle that Emily had explained them away as stress. Michael's compliments became critiques disguised as advice. "That dress is lovely, Ellie, but a bit artistic, don't you think? You want to project power, not whimsy." Her design ideas for their home were dismissed as not the right aesthetic for our brand. Their brand. That's what their marriage had become. The end came not with a bang, but with the cold, sterile click of a closing laptop. Michael came home one Tuesday evening, his posture radiating a chilling calm. He didn't even take off his Tom Ford coat. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, standing by the door as if he were a visitor. She was sketching at their Marble Island, a new community arts center she was designing pro bono. "Okay," she said, putting her pencil down. "Tough day at the office." "My life is about to change." Drastically, he announced, his voice devoid of warmth. "I've been seeing someone. Her name is Tiffany Chamberlain, and I'm leaving you for her." The words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Tiffany Chamberlain. The Instagram model, Michael. She's 23. A smirk played on his lips. She's 24, and she understands the kind of life I'm building. The visibility, the networking. She's an asset. He looked around the apartment she had so lovingly designed. "I'll be generous, of course. My lawyer will be in touch." The divorce was a public execution. Michael, it turned out, hadn't just been seeing Tiffany. He had been parading her around New York's elite social scene for months. Friends who had smiled at Emily at galas last month were now tagged in Instagram photos with Michael and Tiffany clinking champagne glasses on a yacht in the Hamptons. The captions were nauseating. New beginnings. power couple. Upgrade. Michael made sure Emily saw every post. He didn't block her. He wanted her to watch. He wanted her to see Tiffany wearing a Cartier bracelet he'd once promised Emily for their 10th anniversary. He wanted her to see the glowing feature in a society magazine about Wall Street's hottest new couple, complete with a photo shoot in their apartment. The article painted Emily as a footnote, the starter wife who couldn't keep up with his meteoric rise. The worst part was the small, intimate betrayals. He weaponized their shared memories against her. He took Tiffany to Heiress, the restaurant where he had proposed to Emily, and posted a photo of their hands intertwined on the table, Tiffany sporting a new impossibly large diamond. The caption read, "Finally getting it right." His parents, Gloria and Robert, were equally cruel. Gloria called Emily once not to offer condolences, but to twist the knife. "Well, Emily, dear," she'd said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "Michael just needs someone who shines a bit brighter. Tiffany is just so vibrant, you know. She has over 2 million followers. It's wonderful for his business." Emily moved out of the Tribeca apartment and into a small third-floor walk-up in the West Village. The silence of the small space was deafening, broken only by the city sounds outside and the frantic supportive calls from her best friend Chloe. "He's a monster, Emily. A narcissistic, soulless monster," Chloe would rage through the phone. "You are a prize, and he was too stupid to see it." But Emily didn't feel like a prize. She felt discarded. Michael's campaign of humiliation was working. She started avoiding their old haunts, stopped checking her social media, and shrank into herself. He had taken her love, her home, her confidence, and her future, and replaced it all with a bright, shiny younger model, ensuring the whole world watched as he did it. He wasn't just breaking up with her. He was trying to erase her, to paint her as the drab black and white photo before his new life in vibrant technicolor. And for a long time, sitting alone in her tiny apartment surrounded by moving boxes she had no energy to unpack, Emily started to believe him. The first few months post-divorce were a gray fog. Emily felt like a ghost haunting the edges of a life that was no longer hers. Every corner of New York seemed to hold a memory of Michael. A shared laugh in a coffee shop, a stolen kiss under a street lamp in Central Park, a celebratory dinner in a now forbidden restaurant. His digital ghost was even more relentless. Friends with well-meaning but clumsy intentions would bring him up. "Did you see Michael and Tiffany are in Aspen?" Or "I can't believe he bought her that Birkin bag." Each mention was a fresh stab. Chloe, a fiery art gallery curator with zero tolerance for nonsense, became Emily's gatekeeper. "Listen up," Chloe declared one evening, snatching a pint of ice cream from Emily's hands and replacing it with a glass of wine. "The pity party is officially over. We are not letting that slick-haired, soulless Ken doll win. Your name is Emily Vance. You were a rising star at Columbia's School of Architecture before you decided to project manage his ego. It's time to get back to you." Chloe was right. Michael had convinced her that his world was the world, that success was measured in stock prices, gala invitations, and the reflective shine of a new Rolex. He had made her feel small, artistic, and impractical. But in the quiet of her new apartment, away from his judgment, Emily slowly began to find herself again. She unpacked the boxes not with a sense of loss for the home she'd left, but with a budding excitement for the one she could create. She pulled out her old sketchbooks, her drafting tools, her architectural models. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light as she unrolled blueprints for projects she had dreamed up years ago, a sustainable library that integrated nature into its very core, a series of modular, affordable homes for low-income families, a soaring glass atrium for a museum. These weren't just buildings, they were her soul, translated into structure and form. For 5 years they had been gathering dust under the weight of Michael's ambition. She started small. She took on a minor renovation project for a friend of Chloe's, a cramped south of Houston Street loft that needed light and life. Emily poured all her pent-up creativity into it. She knocked down a non-structural wall, designed custom shelving that climbed to the ceiling like a vine, and found a way to install a massive skylight that flooded the space with sunshine. The result was transformative. Her work was more than just good, it was inspired. The loft owner was ecstatic and recommended her to a colleague who then recommended her to another. A trickle of work became a steady stream. Emily established a small LLC, Vance Designs. She built a simple, elegant website showcasing her work, her philosophy clear in every line. We don't just build spaces. We create environments where people can thrive. One evening, while working late on a set of blueprints, her phone buzzed with a notification. Against her better judgment, she glanced at it. It was a tag from a distant cousin. The photo was of Michael and Tiffany beaming on the cover of Modern Engagements magazine. The headline read, "A sterling match finance king, Michael Sterling and influencer Tiffany Chamberlain plan the wedding of the decade." The article was a masterpiece of curated arrogance. Michael bragged about the venue, the Oheka Castle on Long Island. He bragged about Tiffany's custom-designed 8-carat diamond ring. He bragged about their plans for a 6-week honeymoon, circumnavigating the globe on a private jet. But one quote attributed to an unnamed friend struck Emily like a physical blow. Michael is finally with someone who matches his ambition and his lifestyle. His ex-wife was a lovely girl but very quiet, more of a homebody. He needs a star on his arm, and Tiffany is a supernova. The old familiar shame coiled in her stomach. A homebody, quiet. The words were designed to paint her as a failure, a domestic creature unfit for the dazzling world he now inhabited. She closed the browser, her hands trembling. For a moment she felt herself sliding back into the gray fog. But then she looked at the blueprint spread across her desk. She saw the clean lines, the innovative concepts, the life she was building with her own 2 hands and her own mind. He could have his supernova. Supernovas were brilliant, yes, but they were also violent, explosive, and ultimately they collapsed into nothing. Emily preferred to build things that lasted. With a newfound resolve, she turned back to her work. That night, she didn't just work on her current project. She dusted off an old ambitious design from her college thesis. A revolutionary concept for a private residence built into a cliffside, a marvel of engineering and aesthetics that respected and integrated the natural landscape. It was bold, impossible, and beautiful. On a whim, she decided to submit it to the prestigious International Architectural Design Awards. The chances of winning were infinitesimal. But for the first time in a very long time, Emily Vance wasn't afraid of the odds. She was building her own foundation, one blueprint at a time. 6 months passed. Vance Designs was thriving in its own modest way. Emily had hired a junior designer and moved into a small but chic studio space in Chelsea. She was making a name for herself in New York's design circles for her innovative use of space and her uncanny ability to infuse soul into steel and glass. She was busy, fulfilled, and had managed to build a wall of professional focus around her heart. Michael and his upcoming nuptials became a dull background noise she could mostly tune out. Then one crisp autumn afternoon, an email landed in her inbox that felt like a glitch in the matrix. The subject line was simple: inquiry regarding your airy design. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. Airy was the name she had given her cliffside residence project, the one she had submitted to the design awards. She hadn't won the grand prize, but the design had been featured on the competition's website as a notable entry. She had assumed that was the end of it. The email was from an Arthur Pendleton executive assistant to Mr. Julian Thorne. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. The message was concise and professional. Ms. Vance, Mr. Julian Thorne has seen your design concept, Airy, and was exceptionally impressed with its vision and harmony with the natural environment. He is seeking to commission a private residence on a property he owns in Big Sur, California, and believes your design philosophy aligns perfectly with his own. He would like to schedule a meeting with you to discuss the possibility of a commission. Please let me know your availability. Sincerely, Arthur Pendleton, Office of Julian Thorne. Emily's hands shook as she typed Julian Thorne into her search engine. The results made her gasp. Julian Thorne wasn't just wealthy. He was in a different stratosphere of existence. He was the reclusive founder and CEO of Ethelred Technologies, a pioneer in sustainable energy and AI. He was a multi-billionaire, but unlike the flashy tech moguls of Silicon Valley, Thorne was intensely private. There were few photos of him online, mostly grainy paparazzi shots of him boarding a private jet or attending a tech conference years ago. He was known for his philanthropic work in environmental conservation and for his almost fanatical dedication to privacy. This man, this titan of industry, had seen her design, and he wanted to talk to her. A week later, Emily found herself in a town car winding its way through the financial district to a sleek, unmarked skyscraper that housed Ethelred's headquarters. She wore her most professional outfit, a sharp, tailored black suit that felt like armor. She clutched her portfolio to her chest, her mind racing. This was the kind of project architects dreamed of. It could launch her career into the stratosphere. She was escorted to the top floor, a space that was the antithesis of Michael's ostentatious world. There was no gold, no marble, no flashy art. The space was a testament to quiet luxury and natural materials. Warm oak floors, walls of glass overlooking the city, and simple, elegant furniture. Arthur Pendleton, a kind-faced man in his 60s, greeted her warmly and led her to a minimalist conference room. "Mr. Thorne will be with you shortly." Moments later, the door opened, and Julian Thorne walked in. He was not what she expected. He was tall and lean, perhaps in his early 40s, with thoughtful dark eyes and a quiet intensity about him. He wore a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, no suit, no tie, no watch. He looked more like a philosophy professor than a billionaire CEO. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice a low, calm baritone. He shook her hand. His grip was firm and his smile was genuine. "Thank you for coming. I apologize for the summons to my office. I find it's the only place I can guarantee a lack of interruption." "It's an honor, Mr. Thorne," Emily said, finding her professional voice. "Please call me Julian." He gestured for her to sit and took the seat directly across from her, not at the head of the table. "I saw your airy design and I was captivated. Most modern architecture feels like an imposition on the landscape, an act of ego. Yours felt like a conversation with it. For the next hour, they didn't talk about budgets or timelines. They talked about architecture. They talked about the Japanese concept of shake or borrowed scenery. They talked about the importance of natural light and sustainable materials. Julian was incredibly knowledgeable, speaking with a quiet passion that mirrored her own. He saw everything in her design that she had intended. The respect for the environment, the flow of energy, the creation of a sanctuary, not a spectacle. He saw what Michael had called whimsy and recognized it as vision. "The property in Big Sur is special to me," Julian said, his gaze distant for a moment. "It's been in my family for generations. It's a place of peace. I want to build a home there, not a monument. A place to think, a place to be." He looked directly at her. "I believe you are the only person who can build it." Emily left the meeting in a daze. He hadn't just offered her the commission, he had offered her a partnership in creation. The budget he proposed was staggering, giving her complete creative freedom and access to the best materials and engineers in the world. That night, as she began the preliminary sketches for the Big Sur residence, an embossed cream-colored envelope arrived by messenger. It was thick and heavy. Her heart sank as she recognized the Sterling family crest on the wax seal. It was the wedding invitation. "Michael Sterling and Tiffany Chamberlain request the pleasure of your company at the celebration of their marriage." Inside, a small handwritten note was tucked in, penned in Gloria Sterling's perfect cutting script. "Emily, dear, I do hope you'll come. It would show such good grace. We all need to move on after all. Besides, you simply must see Tiffany's dress. Warmly, Gloria." It was a command performance, a summons to witness her final complete replacement. 2 months ago, it would have shattered her. But tonight, as Emily pinned the invitation to her corkboard, she felt a strange sense of calm. She looked from the ostentatious, gaudy invitation to the elegant simplicity of her new project sketches. One was a world of performance and public image. The other was a world of substance and quiet creation. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was on the outside looking in. She felt like she had been liberated. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of creativity and intense focus. Emily flew to Big Sur twice to walk the stunning, rugged coastline with Julian. The property was even more breathtaking than she had imagined, a dramatic cliff overlooking the crashing waves of the Pacific surrounded by ancient cypress trees. Her collaboration with Julian was unlike any professional experience she'd ever had. He was deeply involved but never controlling. He would ask insightful questions that pushed her designs to be better, more innovative. They spent hours on video calls, not just discussing floor plans and structural engineering, but philosophy, art, and what it truly means to create a home. He listened to her, truly listened, with an attentiveness that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't realized she'd been missing for years. During one late-night call, while they were debating the specific type of reclaimed timber to use, Emily found herself laughing freely at a dry joke he made. She paused, surprised by the sound. When was the last time she had laughed like that? "Is everything all right?" Julian asked, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Yes," she said, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "Everything is perfect. I'm enjoying this. The work, the process. It's reminding me of why I fell in love with architecture in the first place." "Good," he said, his own smile soft and genuine. "Your passion for it is what makes the design extraordinary." The compliment was simple, direct, and landed in her heart with a warmth that had nothing to do with validation and everything to do with genuine respect. It was the polar opposite of Michael's backhanded praise. As the wedding date loomed, Chloe was adamant. "You are not going to that circus alone. I'm coming with you. We'll be fabulous, unbothered, and we will leave the second anyone says anything stupid, which will probably be within the first 5 minutes." Emily agreed. She knew she had to go. Not showing up would be seen as weakness, as proof that she was too broken to face them. Showing up composed and confident was the only way to truly close that chapter. She bought a dress, a stunning midnight blue silk gown, that was elegant, understated, and fit her perfectly. It wasn't flashy or revealing. It spoke of quiet confidence, the very quality Gloria Sterling had once dismissed. The wedding at Oheka Castle was exactly the spectacle Emily had expected. It was a hurricane of white roses, ice sculptures, and shimmering gold accents. Tiffany, in a massive jewel-encrusted dress, looked less like a bride and more like a pageant winner. Michael was in his element, preening in his custom tuxedo, greeting guests with an owner's pride as if he had personally invented marriage. He spotted Emily and Chloe across the ballroom and made a beeline for them, Tiffany in tow like a prize show dog. "Emily, I'm so glad you could make it," he said, his voice booming with false magnanimity. "It means so much that there are no hard feelings." He wrapped his arm possessively around Tiffany's tiny waist. "Have you met my wife, Tiffany?" "We haven't been formally introduced," Emily said, her voice even and calm. She met Tiffany's gaze. The younger woman looked slightly nervous up close, her smile a little too bright. "Congratulations." The ceremony was beautiful. "Thank you," Tiffany gushed. "Isn't this place just a dream? Michael planned everything. He's just so capable." "The best or nothing, right?" Ellie Michael said, using the old condescending pet name. "Speaking of, I heard you're doing some small renovation projects now. That's great. Good for you for keeping busy." The jab was meant to sting, to remind her of her smallness in his grand world. Chloe's hand tightened on Emily's arm, ready to intervene, but Emily was unshaken. "I am keeping busy," Emily replied smoothly, a serene smile on her face. "My firm is doing very well, thank you." Before Michael could press further, Gloria Sterling descended upon them. "Emily, darling, you look nice," she said, her eyes doing a quick, dismissive scan of Emily's dress. "So brave of you to come." Now you must excuse us. The photographer wants some shots of the happy couple with the CEO of Goldman Sachs." As they swept away, Chloe muttered, "I think I'm going to be sick." Emily just shook her head, a genuine small laugh escaping her. "It's okay, Chloe. It's all just noise." And for the first time she believed it. Seeing Michael in his natural habitat, so desperate for external validation, so obsessed with the performance of happiness, she didn't feel sadness or jealousy. She felt a profound sense of pity. They stayed for one drink, and then, as promised, made a graceful exit. As they waited for their car, Emily's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I heard tonight might be difficult. Just remember that what you are creating in Big Sur will outlast every champagne tower and ice sculpture there. It has substance. You have substance." Emily stared at the screen, her heart doing a slow, surprising flip. Julian. He must have gotten her number from Arthur. He had thought of her tonight of all nights. His simple private message of support meant more to her than any public display of affection ever had. It was a quiet acknowledgement of her worth, a whisper of a new world that had nothing to do with the loud, hollow spectacle she was leaving behind. Looking back at the garish lights of the castle, Emily realized she wasn't escaping a painful memory. She was simply leaving a party she had no interest in attending anymore. Her future was waiting perched on a cliffside in Big Sur, bathed in the quiet, steady light of the Pacific sun. Autumn bled into winter, and the Big Sur project, officially named the Thorn Residence, became Emily's magnificent obsession. The designs were finalized. The engineering challenges met with brilliant solutions, and the initial groundwork had begun. Her professional relationship with Julian deepened into a genuine friendship. They discovered a shared love for obscure literature, minimalist art, and long walks. He visited New York more frequently, and their business meetings often bled into dinners at quiet, out-of-the-way restaurants where they would talk for hours. Emily found herself drawn to his calm, insightful nature. He never bragged about his wealth or success. Instead, he spoke about his responsibilities, his desire to leave a positive impact on the world, and his genuine curiosity about her perspective. With him, she felt not like an accessory, but an equal. The attraction between them was a palpable, unspoken current growing stronger with each meeting. It was slow, respectful, and utterly real. Meanwhile, Michael and Tiffany Sterling were on a relentless PR tour of their own marriage. Their social media was a fire hose of curated bliss, skiing in Gstaad, shopping on the Avenue Montaigne in Paris, sunbathing in the Maldives. Michael was frequently quoted in financial columns, and he always found a way to mention his stunning and supportive wife, Tiffany. He was building his brand, and his marriage was the cornerstone. The collision of these two worlds was inevitable. It happened at the annual Metropolitan Museum of Art Conservation Gala, the undisputed pinnacle of New York's philanthropic scene. It was the one event Julian attended every year, as he was the primary benefactor. This year he had asked Emily to be his guest. "As the architect of my most important project, it's only fitting you be there," he'd said, though the look in his eyes suggested a deeper meaning. Emily accepted, her heart fluttering with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She knew Michael and Tiffany would be there. It would be their first public encounter since the wedding. When Julian arrived at her apartment to pick her up, she was momentarily breathless. He was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking impossibly handsome and sophisticated. But it was his smile, warm and meant only for her, that made her feel truly beautiful. "Emily," he said, his voice soft with admiration. "You look exquisite." She was wearing a deep emerald green gown, a color that brought out the light in her eyes. It was a classic, elegant design by a lesser-known designer she admired. It was a dress that whispered confidence. It didn't scream for attention. Their arrival at the Met was quiet and understated. Julian, valuing his privacy, used a discreet entrance, bypassing the main crush of paparazzi on the red carpet. Inside, however, they were instantly the center of a very powerful universe. Captains of industry, famed artists, and old-money philanthropists greeted Julian with deference and warmth, and they all looked at Emily with intense curiosity. Julian introduced her simply and with evident pride. "This is Emily Vance, a brilliant architect." They were enjoying a glass of champagne near the Temple of Dendur when a familiar grating voice cut through the sophisticated buzz. "Well, well, well. Look who's here." Michael Sterling stood before them, a wide, predatory grin on his face. Tiffany was on his arm, dripping in diamonds and a gaudy, feathered Versace gown that seemed to be wearing her. "Ellie," Michael said, his eyes flicking over her dress with a hint of a sneer. "I almost didn't recognize you," trying a new look. He then turned his full attention to Julian, extending a hand. "Michael Sterling, Morgan Stanley. We haven't been properly introduced, Mr. Thorne. It's a real honor. My wife Tiffany is a huge admirer of your work in technology." Julian shook his hand briefly, his expression unreadable. "Sterling? Yes. I've seen your name." Michael puffed up with pride. "Oh, well, great to hear. We're really making waves in the emerging markets division." He then gestured towards Emily with a dismissive wave of his hand. "I was just so surprised to see my ex-wife here. Small world, right? She's more of the quiet, stay-at-home type. I've been trying to encourage her to get out more since our split." The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife. He was painting a picture for Julian. "This is my cast-off, a simple girl you found who is out of her depth." He was trying to establish dominance, to reclaim Emily as a character in his story. Emily felt a flush of anger, but before she could speak, Julian moved slightly, placing a subtle, protective hand on the small of her back. The gesture was both intimate and commanding. "I believe you're mistaken, Mr. Sterling," Julian said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Ms. Vance is not the stay-at-home type. She is in fact the creative visionary behind my new residence in Big Sur. It's the most ambitious private architectural project in North America right now." A stunned silence fell over their small group. Michael's jaw went slack. He knew the rumors of the mysterious Thorne residence. It was the talk of the financial and architectural worlds, a project with a seemingly unlimited budget shrouded in secrecy. To be the architect on that project wasn't just a job, it was a career-defining coronation. Julian wasn't finished. He looked at Emily, his expression softening into one of genuine affection. "And she is not here because I am encouraging her to get out more. She is here as my partner." He didn't need to say more. The word partner hung in the air, electric and definitive. It was a quiet checkmate. In one calm, devastating statement, Julian had not only annihilated Michael's narrative, but had elevated Emily to a level of prestige Michael could only dream of. Michael's face, which had been a mask of smug superiority, crumbled. He stared at Emily as if seeing her for the first time not as his mousy ex-wife, but as the architect of the legendary Thorne residence, and the partner of the man everyone in this room revered. He saw the beautiful, confident woman in the emerald dress, and for the first time a flicker of horrified realization crossed his face. He hadn't just discarded her, he had misjudged her value on a catastrophic scale. Tiffany, sensing the sudden dramatic shift in power, looked confused. The Thorne residence weight is that the one Architectural Digest is calling the eighth wonder of the modern world. Julian smiled down at Emily, ignoring Tiffany completely. "Shall we go find our table?" he murmured for her ears only. As he guided her away, leaving Michael and Tiffany standing there in stunned, humiliated silence, Emily felt a profound sense of release. It wasn't the thrill of revenge. It was the quiet, powerful joy of being seen, respected, and valued for exactly who she was. The king had been toppled not by a loud declaration of war, but by the simple, undeniable truth. The aftermath of the Met Gala was a silent, deadly shockwave that radiated through Michael Sterling's carefully constructed world. The news of Emily Vance, visionary architect of the Thorne residence, and Julian Thorne's new partner spread through New York's elite circles like wildfire. It was the ultimate society gossip, a story so rich with irony and reversal of fortune that it was irresistible. For Michael, the humiliation was acute and relentless. At work, colleagues who once fawned over him now looked at him with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. The sterling name, which he had worked so hard to associate with success and power, was now the punchline to a citywide joke, the guy who traded a masterpiece for a knockoff. His boss, a man who valued perception above all else, called him into his office for a chat about his public profile. The implication was clear. Michael's brand was now toxic. His parents were mortified. Gloria Sterling called him her voice, a hysterical whisper. "Michael, what have you done? Everyone is talking. The Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers. They're all asking about Emily. They think we're fools, that we cast out a diamond and kept the zirconia." But the most significant damage was happening within the walls of his own Tribeca apartment. The foundation of his marriage to Tiffany, built as it was on the shallow bedrock of status and image, began to crumble immediately. Tiffany's identity was intrinsically linked to being the ultimate upgrade. She had won the prize. The Met Gala shattered that illusion. She had been publicly revealed not as the winner but as the consolation prize. The man she married, whom she believed to be a titan, had been effortlessly dwarfed and dismissed by a true giant. "How could you not tell me who she was working for?" she shrieked at him the night of the gala, her feathered dress now looking ridiculous in their sterile living room. "You made me look like an idiot. You stood there bragging about your job while she's literally building a landmark with Julian Thorne. How was I supposed to know?" Michael shot back, his frustration boiling over. "She was designing closets and loft renovations. It doesn't make any sense." "No, what doesn't make sense is you," Tiffany retorted, her perfectly made-up face contorted with fury. "You told me she was a nobody, a quiet, boring little homebody. But she's the one at the table with the billionaires, and I'm the one you're dragging around like a handbag." Their arguments became a daily occurrence. Tiffany's admiration for Michael, which had always been tied to his perceived power and status, evaporated. She now saw him through the world's new eyes as the man who had fumbled the ultimate prize. She grew resentful, her posts on social media becoming less about their #couple goals and more about her solo shopping sprees and spa days. The we of their brand was dissolving into a very bitter me. Michael in turn began to look at Tiffany and see not a supernova, but a black hole of expense and superficiality. He saw the endless bills for clothes bags and treatments. He heard the vapid conversations about influencers and brand deals. He compared her obsession with selfies and follower counts to his memory of Emily sketching quietly at their island, lost in a world of creation and ideas. The ghost of Emily haunted him. He started to remember things he had long since buried, the intelligence in her eyes when she talked about her designs, her quiet strength, the way she could create warmth and beauty out of nothing. He had called it whimsy, dismissed it as impractical. Now he saw it for what it was. Genius. A genius he had thrown away because it didn't fit into the narrow, boring box he had labeled success. He became obsessed. He scoured the internet for articles about Emily and the Thorne residence. He saw the accolades, the praise from the world's most respected architectural critics. He saw photographs of her and Julian, candid shots of them laughing on the Big Sur site, looking at each other with an easy intimacy that he and Tiffany had never once managed to fake for the camera. The final nail in the coffin of his marriage came a few months later. A deal Michael had been counting on at work, a major stepping stone to a promotion, fell through. He later found out through a colleague that the primary investor had pulled out after a private dinner with Julian Thorne, where Thorne had casually mentioned that any associate of Michael Sterling's was, in his opinion, a man of questionable judgment. Julian never had to say why. He didn't have to lift a finger in anger. His quiet disapproval was a more effective weapon than any overt act of revenge. That night, Michael came home to find Tiffany's closets empty. A single perfectly manicured note was left on the marble island next to a copy of the latest issue of Vanity Fair. On the cover was Emily Vance standing in front of a breathtaking photo of the half-finished Big Sur house under the headline, The Architect of the Future. How Emily Vance is Redefining American Design. Tiffany's note was short. I'm going to my mother's in Palm Beach. My lawyer will be in touch. Michael Sterling stood alone in the silent, empty apartment that Emily had once filled with life. He was a king in a kingdom of one. He had bragged to the world about his beautiful bride and his perfect life, and now he had lost it all. Not because Emily had sought revenge, but because she had simply moved on and embraced her own worth, a worth so immense that its light had cast his entire world into shadow. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of his own spectacular failure. 2 years later, the Thorne residence was complete. It wasn't just a house, it was a masterpiece. Cantilevered over the Pacific, it seemed to float between sea and sky, a perfect fusion of natural materials and futuristic design. The home was featured in every major architectural publication worldwide, winning Emily the prestigious Pritzker Architecture Prize, the highest honor in her field. Vance Designs was now an internationally sought-after firm with a long wait list of discerning clients. But Emily's greatest triumph was not professional. It was personal, quiet, and deeply profound. Her relationship with Julian had blossomed into a deep and abiding love. They were partners in every sense of the word. He celebrated her successes as if they were his own, and provided a steady grounding presence that allowed her creative spirit to soar. She in turn brought warmth, laughter, and a new perspective into his structured private world. Their wedding was the antithesis of Michael and Tiffany's ostentatious affair. They were married on the terrace of the completed Big Sur home as the sun set over the Pacific. There were only 30 guests, close family, and their truest friends, including a beaming Chloe as the maid of honor. Emily designed her own dress, a simple flowing silk gown that was as elegant and timeless as her architecture. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising not a lifetime of performance, but one of partnership, respect, and quiet joy. There was no society photographer, no magazine deal. The only announcement was a simple post on the Vance Designs website a week later, with a single photo, their hands now adorned with simple wedding bands clasped together against the backdrop of the ocean. Emily rarely thought of Michael anymore. He was a figure from a past life, a lesson learned. She had heard through the grapevine that his divorce from Tiffany had been messy and expensive. He had lost his promotion at Morgan Stanley and eventually took a lesser position at a smaller, less prestigious firm in Chicago, effectively exiled from the New York financial world he had once worshipped. His star had not just faded, it had been extinguished. On occasion she would feel a fleeting sense of pity for him, for a man so blinded by ego that he couldn't see the real value in anything, including himself. One evening, Emily and Julian were sitting by the outdoor fire pit at their home, a gentle breeze coming off the ocean. She was leaning against his shoulder, sketching in her notebook not for a client, but for pleasure. She was designing a small, free community library for the nearby town of Carmel. "What are you creating now?" Julian asked, his voice a soft rumble against her ear. "Something small," she said, smiling. "Something for people to share." He kissed the top of her head. "My brilliant wife. You build worlds, Emily, whether they're out of glass and steel on a cliffside or out of paper and ink for a small town." In that moment, Emily felt a sense of peace so complete it felt like coming home. Her triumph was not that she had married a billionaire. That was simply a beautiful consequence of finding a man who saw her. Her real victory was that she had rebuilt her life on her own terms, according to her own blueprint. Michael had tried to tear her down and brag about the rubble, but he had failed to understand a fundamental principle of architecture: a strong foundation can withstand any storm. And from the ashes of her old life, Emily Vance had not just built a house. She had built an empire of her own happiness. Life at Big Sur settled into a rhythm of breathtaking beauty and profound peace. For Emily, the past was no longer a shadow that followed her, but a closed book on a distant shelf gathering dust. Her days were filled with light, both literal and metaphorical. She and Julian had founded the Thorne Vance Foundation, a philanthropic venture dedicated to funding sustainable architecture and protecting natural landscapes worldwide. Emily poured her soul into it, scouting projects, mentoring young architects, and using her platform to champion a new generation of design that was both beautiful and responsible. Her marriage was a sanctuary. With Julian, she discovered the quiet power of a partnership built on mutual intellectual curiosity and unwavering emotional support. Their love wasn't a spectacle for public consumption. It was 1,000 small private moments debating a book over breakfast, hiking the cypress trails behind their home. In comfortable silence, his hand finding hers as they watched the fog roll in from the Pacific. She was happy in a way so complete and foundational that the brittle, performative life she'd led with Michael seemed like a story about someone else entirely. The echo from that old life arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, carried on the agitated voice of her best friend. "Emily, are you sitting down?" Chloe asked, her tone stripped of its usual sarcastic levity. Emily was in her studio, the glass walls offering an uninterrupted view of the ocean. She put down her charcoal pencil. "I am now, Chloe. What's wrong?" "You sound rattled." There was a hesitant pause. "He found me," Chloe said, her voice low. "Michael, he's here, in New York. He reached out to the gallery, said it was a matter of life and death. I met him. God, Emily, I don't know why I met him, but I did." A cold dread, unfamiliar and unwelcome, trickled down Emily's spine. She hadn't spoken Michael's name or heard it spoken in her presence in over 3 years. "What did he want?" "To talk about you," Chloe said, her voice laced with a mixture of disgust and a strange, unsettling pity. "Emily, he's a wreck, a complete and utter disaster. He looks 10 years older. His suit was cheap, it was fraying at the cuffs. He's lost everything. The job in Chicago didn't last. He apparently made a series of terrible high-risk investments trying to make a big comeback and got wiped out. The Sterlings cut him off completely after the second divorce. He's been living in some rundown apartment in Queens selling insurance or something equally grim." Emily remained silent, her mind struggling to process the image. The slick, arrogant man in the Tom Ford coat was gone, replaced by this pathetic phantom. He sat there in a coffee shop in south of Houston Street. Chloe continued, her voice gaining a harder edge, and he started talking about the old days, about how he was a fool, how he was blinded by ego. He said he reads every article about you, that he's so proud of everything you've accomplished. He cried, Emily. Actual tears. Said you were the only real thing in his life, and he threw it all away. What does he want, Chloe? Emily repeated, her voice firm, cutting through the emotional preamble. There it was. The real reason. He didn't ask for money. Chloe admitted. He's too proud, or maybe just too manipulative for that. He wants a recommendation, a second chance. He heard the foundation is backing a new sustainable urban development project in Chicago, a massive one. He wants you to put in a good word for him, to help him get a meeting with the developers. He said he just needs one break to get back on his feet, to prove he's a changed man. Emily closed her eyes, the sound of the distant waves filling the silence. The audacity of it was breathtaking. After a campaign of public humiliation, after attempting to systematically destroy her self-worth, he was now appealing to the very grace and decency he had tried to extinguish. He wasn't asking for a handout. He was asking her to leverage her hard-won success, the very success built from the ashes of the life he torched, to salvage his own. Do not respond to him again, Emily said, her voice a calm, cold blade. Don't take his calls. Don't answer his emails. Send him to me. Emily, no, Chloe protested. You don't owe him the time of day. Let me just tell him to get lost. He won't stop until he hears it from me, Emily stated with certainty. He's banking on the idea that I'm still the same woman he can manipulate. I need to close the door myself. For good. That evening she told Julian everything. He listened patiently, his dark eyes watching her, gauging her reaction. When she finished, he didn't offer advice. He simply asked, What does your heart tell you to do? My heart tells me he's a black hole and getting too close means getting pulled in, she said honestly. But there's this stupid, nagging voice that feels a sliver of pity for the man he's become. Pity is a noble emotion, Emily Julian said, taking her hand. But it should not be a leash that allows your past to drag you back. His current situation is the direct result of 1,000 choices he made. You are not one of those choices anymore. Your only obligation is to your own peace. She knew he was right. The next day, she sent Michael a single terse email from a new address created specifically for the purpose. Michael, Chloe passed on your message. I am willing to have one and only one 5-minute phone call with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time. You will call my assistant's number. This will be our final communication. The next morning, she sat in her studio, Julian by her side, but out of frame of the video call she had initiated with her assistant Arthur, who would connect Michael. The call came through precisely at 10 a.m. Michael's face appeared on the screen. Chloe had been kind in her description. He looked haggard, his face puffy and pale. The old confidence was gone, replaced by a desperate, hungry look. He was in a dimly lit room that was clearly not an office. Emily, he breathed, his voice cracking. Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. You look incredible. Happy. I have 4 minutes, Michael, she said, her tone devoid of emotion. What do you want? The directness clearly threw him. He stammered, then launched into the same speech he'd given Chloe. The apologies, the regrets, the self-flagellation. He was performing the role of the penitent man. Emily let him speak for 2 minutes, then cut him off. You want a recommendation for the Chicago project? Yes, he said, his eyes lighting up with hope. Just a word, Emily. An introduction. From you, it would mean everything. It would give me a chance to atone, to build something real again. She looked at him, at the ghost of the man she once loved, and felt a profound and final clarity. He hadn't changed at all. He didn't want to atone. He wanted a shortcut. He still saw her not as a person, but as a resource to be exploited, first her support, now her success. No, she said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a landslide. What he whispered, his face falling. No, Michael. I will not be giving you a recommendation. I will not be making an introduction. The life I have built is a testament to what a person can achieve with their own merit when they are free of toxic influences. Your path back, if there is one, must be the same. It must be your own. You want to build something real. Then start from the foundation. Get a job. Work hard. Be honest. Earn your way back. That is the only atonement that matters. Desperation flooded his face. Emily, please, I'm asking for your help. After everything we shared. What we shared is over, she stated, her voice unwavering. And my help would be a disservice to you. It would be one more unearned prize for a man who has never understood the value of anything he didn't acquire easily. My final gift to you, Michael, is the truth. Your life is your responsibility. Goodbye. Before he could respond, she ended the call. The screen went black. A deep, shuddering breath escaped her. She had not been cruel. She had been definitive. She had offered him not the help he wanted, but the advice he needed. Julian's hand came to rest on her shoulder. Are you all right? He asked softly. Emily turned to him, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, but it was not a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. I am now, she said. I'm finally completely free. The echo had faded, and all that was left was the sound of the ocean and the steady, reassuring beat of her own peaceful heart. And so Emily's story isn't one of revenge. It's a powerful testament to the fact that the greatest success is living well and true to yourself. Michael Sterling thought worth was measured by public opinion by the flashiness of a new partner. But Emily proved that true value is intrinsic. It's in your talent, your passion, your integrity. While he was busy writing captions, she was busy building a legacy. In the end, he became a forgotten footnote in her incredible story. What do you think is the most powerful form of comeback? Is it loud and vengeful, or is it the quiet, undeniable success that speaks for itself? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If Emily's journey from heartbreak to triumph inspired you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of empowerment and unexpected victory. Thank you for watching.